There are two types of mousepads. One is soft, the other is hard. The Razer Atlas is made out of glass, which should automatically make it a speed pad, until I tested a couple of mouse feet and then it changed drastically. But as usual, I found a productivity justification for using something like a tempered glass mousepad. But are there even more reasons to get the Razer Atlas? The Razer Atlas comes in a huge 400mm by 450mm. The good part is that it would sit well on top of desk pads from the custom keyboard hobby. The bad part is that it takes up most of the desk pad design. If you're using the Atlas without the desk pad underneath, it does have a better grip that doesn't slip in comparison to a desk pad. But the reason I bring the desk pad up is because I would normally have a desk pad in order to mute and clean up sounds coming from my mechanical keyboard. Obviously, this is a mousepad, but if I go through the lengths of making my keyboard muted, this turns the Razer Atlas, a glass mousepad, into a potential issue depending on the skates you use, where, weirdly enough, going with something like a glass-on-glass experience was weirdly the quietest, and PTFE being the loudest. More on that a little later. One of the reasons you would get a glass surface is that it's easy to clean and practically spill-proof. The downside is, dust feels like a grain of sand underneath the mouse, where it's a trade-off between a convenient cleaning solution, simply taking a wet cloth and wiping off any dirt off the pad, but you're also likely to constantly clean it, comparing to have to scrub and wash a cloth mousepad, assuming you even notice that it gets grimy. If you're the type of person that seems to have acid sweat and eat through most mousepads, including plastic hard pads, glass won't degrade as much, but I can't say as much about the rubber underneath. However, I've personally had no problems with sweat and it feeling sticky under my palm or wrist area. But what about the long-term use? I have almost exclusively been using one side of the mousepad since I was playing with it, with high sensitivity. Going over either side, there isn't much difference. But focusing with my eyes closed and concentrating really hard to find a difference, I can confidently say that the side I've been using constantly is slightly smoother. Probably because I've deposited some of the PTFE into the surface of the mousepad, but I have no way to confirm if this is actually the case, or if the break-in makes the surface feel a little smoother. Like I said in the start of the video, how the surface feels drastically changes between the different mouse skates. While I don't have every mouse skate in existence, I have glass feet from Pulsar, ceramic skates from Lexip, and stock PTFE skates from Razer and Logitech, which have a relatively large surface area. Meanwhile, there's also the small PTFE skates from Glorious and HyperX. There are even plastic feet, which I have not even tried yet, but maybe if enough of you subscribe, I can get to it sooner than later. Now, how they actually feel on the glass mousepad. I'll start with glass on glass, because that sounds like it would be nails on a chalkboard experience. Counterintuitively, I can barely hear it. Using it with high sensitivity was almost impossible, because it feels like it's hovering like an air hockey puck, where even double-clicking on a folder can turn into multiple click and drags instead. In games, it's not as bad as I thought, but it did make me anticipate the movement of my aim when pressing down the mouse button, which took me a couple weeks to get used to. I would say you're likely to have a floaty aim if you have a medium or low sensitivity. I do have to remind you that I'm not using the same mice and different feet with huge discrepancy in weight. I'll put some of the details in the bottom left corner. But the main focus is how different mice can feel on the Razer Atlas, not the mouse performance. Moving to a similar hard material, the ceramic feet from Lexip, it's a much rougher experience. There's almost a grittiness to it, however the glide is similar, where this time I have a better stopping power, making a better experience for flick shooters. While it does get much louder, the real issue I find is the high-pitched nature of the sound. Bringing us to the PTFE feet from Razer on their Basilisk V3 Pro. This feels a lot smoother than the ceramic feet, but it does feel like it gains a little more drag, which means again, more stopping power. But this time, despite the sound level not getting worse, the pitch is much more acceptable. Doesn't mean all PTFE skates are made to work as well with the glass pads. The large skates from Logitech's G502X, which is better than Logitech's previous skates, feel horribly gritty on the glass but would be similar to getting a control or even a mud pad and is even the loudest of the bunch. Which is unfortunate because the Glide would be the most similar to having a cloth desk pad. To add some more context, the G502X feels smoother than the Basilisk when on a general cloth mousepad, but the experience for both mice reverses on the Razer Atlas. However, how does moving the smaller feet affect this experience? It's the same where one can be rougher and louder than the other, where the HyperX Haste is loud and rough with considerable stopping power, while the Glorious Model D feels smoother but isn't that much more silent. But I did also say I found a productivity reason to justify getting the Razer Atlas. There's two. The first is that you are more likely than not to keep the area clean, because any bit of dust can feel like you're using a mouse on sandpaper. And even putting heavy metal objects like a water bottle can feel like you would crack the mousepad if you put it down a little too hard, allowing you to have a clear workspace, which I always find makes me a little more productive than a coffee in the morning. The second part is I don't poke holes into my notes when writing on a hard surface. Yes, that seems unrelated, but this allows me to have my soft desk pad to rest my elbows on while having a fully available surface for notes. And of course, I don't have to swap to my gaming mousepad, aka procrastinating. And if you'd like to continue procrastinating, check out the mice I've used in this video here. Make sure to subscribe for more content on tech and their ability for both productivity and gaming. I'm your host Naka. Have a nice one. There's a way to turn procrastination into being productive, and that is to procrastinate later.